Picture this. You are standing in the middle of a massive, just bustling commercial market.
Oh, yeah. The noise alone is overwhelming.
Right. I mean, heavy wooden crates are slamming down onto concrete loading docks all around you. Vendors are shouting over the hum of idling diesel engines.
Just absolute chaos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pallet jacks are whizzing past your ankles, and out in the loading bays, there's a logistics truck scheduled to arrive in exactly 90 minutes.
And that clock is ticking loud.
It really is.
Mm.
So this is the exact scenario at the heart of our source material today. It's a script titled The Strategic Sourcing Mission.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating one.
It follows these two procurement professionals, Sarah and James, right? And they are on this frantic 90-minute dash to supply a major, incredibly high-end gala.
But we aren't just looking at, a stressful grocery run today.
No, definitely not. We're doing a deep dive into the actual mechanics of project management, real-time negotiation, and crisis mitigation, all happening inside a live supply chain. Okay, let's unpack this. This source reads less like a catering order and more like a tactical military operation, where the munitions are like edible flowers and heirloom vegetables.
That is a great way to put it. Because, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the true value of this source material is watching how professionals balance incredibly rigid parameters.
Like the budget and deadlines.
Right. They have a fixed budget, a hard deadline, and zero margin for error on quality. And they have to balance all of that with the completely unpredictable variables of a physical market.
Which is constantly moving.
Exactly. They're operating in an environment where the ground is literally shifting underneath them, and they have to absorb all those shocks without the end client ever feeling a bump.
And man, that first shock hits them before they even secure a single item.
Oh, it's immediate.
Yeah, so we start with the foundational layer of any operation, right? The budget. Sarah and James hit the market, and their immediate priority is locking down premium organic produce.
Because that stuff goes fast.
Super fast. We're talking delicate microgreens, especially white asparagus, and edible flowers from a vendor named Greenleaf Organics.
Yeah. And the source makes a point to note that if they don't secure these items in the first hour, local high-end restaurants will just buy out the entire supply.
Right. So there's this massive baseline tension of scarcity right out of the gate. But as they are speed walking to the stalls, Sarah brings up this huge complication.
The dreaded late-night phone call.
Yes. The client called the night before and increased the guest list by 15%.
Which is a huge jump for a high-end gala.
It really is. They need significantly more food. But, and here's the kicker, the budget hasn't budged a single cent.
Yeah, which basically forces a real-time recalculation of their entire strategy. I mean, high quality in a physical market is an incredibly finite resource.
Right, you can't just magic up more premium asparagus.
Exactly. Once a premium batch is sold, it's gone. You are completely bound by the physical harvest. So they have to solve this structural math problem right on the spot.
How to acquire more premium goods without injecting any new capital.
Exact.
And we get to see exactly how they solve it when they approach a vendor named Mr. Henderson. They need vine-ripened tomatoes.
And Sarah is very particular here.
Oh, totally. She's physically inspecting the product, making sure they were harvested yesterday evening, checking for perfect firmness, uniform color. And then she drops the bomb that they need 2 extra crates to cover the new guest count.
And that's where James steps in to handle the financial gap.
Right. James pushes for a volume discount. He basically offers Mr. Henderson a long-term partnership for an upcoming summer event series.
Yeah, and Henderson agrees to a 5% discount on the unit price, but he counters with a condition of his own.
The payment has to be processed by EOD, end of the day.
Right. And, what's fascinating here is how this exchange is just a perfect illustration of relational economics in B2B sourcing.
Relational economics.
Yeah. In commercial procurement, consistency and volume operate as a secondary currency. James is taking an immediate cash flow problem, the sudden guest increase, and he's solving it by spending their agency's future reliability.
Okay, but isn't it incredibly risky to hinge a 5% budget reduction on the promise of future summer events? Like, what if those events don't pan out?
Well, sure, there's always risk, but you have to look at the market signaling and the seasonality of the industry.
Okay.
Summer is notoriously slow for high-end commercial catering. So fixed overhead for a vendor like Henderson, his stall rent, staffing, cooler maintenance, all of that stays exactly the same whether he sells 1 crate of tomatoes or 50.
So he needs a guarantee.
Right. By securing a commitment for the slow season, he is essentially buying a call option on future revenue. He's totally willing to take a 5% haircut on today's invoice to mitigate the risk of making zero revenue in July.
That makes a lot of sense.
And furthermore, his counteroffer requiring payment by the end of the day is a very calculated hedge on his part.
Because he gets the cash immediately.
Exactly. He is securing immediate liquidity. I mean, in an industry where net 30 or net 60 payment terms are standard, getting cash in the bank before sunset is a tangible financial benefit. It completely offsets that 5% discount.
So they're essentially trading future stability for immediate flexibility.
Spot on.
And that patches the budget hole. But as we know, financial gymnastics do not keep perishables fresh.
No, they certainly do not.
Protecting the budget doesn't matter at all if you can't protect the product, which introduces this completely different type of supply chain stress.
The physical fragility of the goods.
Right. Like you've secured the asset on paper, but now you have to defend its physical integrity.
And that is often the hardest part.
We see this so clearly when they move on to secure the protein for the event. They're hunting down Atlantic salmon from a vendor called Blue Wave Seafood.
And the client parameters here are just incredibly strict.
Oh, incredibly. The salmon has to be MSC certified.
The Marine Stewardship Council.
Right, which guarantees sustainable, traceable sourcing. But James isn't just focused on the certification paperwork.
No, he's looking at the reality of moving it.
He tells Sarah they need airtight cold chain logistics to ensure the temperature doesn't fluctuate even a fraction of a degree during transport. Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like they are transporting a donor organ.
That is a perfect analogy.
They aren't just buying fish. They are buying an unbroken timeline of cold air.
Yes, because the cold chain is the hidden vulnerability of all food logistics. You can have this perfect supply chain stretching thousands of miles across the ocean, but the entire operation can fail in a matter of minutes.
Sitting on a loading dock.
Exactly. That framing is crucial to understanding physical procurement. The source really demonstrates that true quality control goes far beyond just the origin of the product.
Right, the MSC certification is great for the menu.
Oh, it's fantastic for the menu description. It gives the client this great narrative of responsible sourcing. But if that salmon sits on an ambient temperature loading dock for 20 minutes,
It's ruined.
the certification becomes entirely irrelevant. Quality control requires micromanaging the environment right up to the very last second of delivery. It highlights the absolute vulnerability of the last mile in any logistical chain.
And Sarah's preparation reflects that harsh reality. She tells James she already has a refrigerated van physically idling at Bay 4.
Which is smart.
Super smart.
Mm.
But they don't just blindly rely on the van being cold. There is one final hurdle. Before a single box is loaded into that van, they plan to conduct a physical QA check quality assurance right there on the dock.
Right, the inspection.
Yeah, they're going to visually inspect the gills and the scales of the salmon.
And this is exactly how professionals handle that last mile vulnerability. Supply chain managers know that the greatest risk of thermal abuse happens during transfer points.
The 50 feet between the vendor's ice bed and the refrigerated van.
Exactly. That is where the cold chain is most likely to break. Sarah and James understand that you simply cannot outsource trust in that final stretch.
You have to see it yourself.
Yeah, because the visual inspection of the gills and scales, it serves as a biological proxy for the thermal history of the fish.
Right, how so?
Well, if the gills are dull or the scales are starting to look dry, it indicates there has been temperature fluctuation. So by inspecting the product right at the point of transfer, they ensure they reject a compromised asset before it officially becomes their logistical liability.
Wow. So you don't just trust the system, you actually verify the handoff.
Always.
But, even if you manage your own 50 feet of logistics perfectly, you are still totally at the mercy of global infrastructure.
Oh, absolutely. And macro supply chains fail all the time.
All the time. Which brings us to the moment in the source where external factors force a major immediate pivot.
Because internal logistics can be perfectly controlled, but you cannot dictate the speed of a global shipping container.
Nope. So the client made a highly specific, very inflexible request for the artisanal cheese board. They demanded an aged Gruyere imported directly from Switzerland.
Very specific.
Yeah, but Sarah reveals a massive roadblock. There was a delay at the commercial port last week. The imported Swiss cheese they need just isn't in the market.
It's probably sitting in a shipping container miles out at sea.
Exactly. So they are faced with a complete breakdown of the global supply chain.
Yeah.
But James is entirely unfazed. He already have a plan B scouted.
Which is just great project management.
He points them toward a boutique creamery 3 stalls down. They produce an award-winning sharp cheddar with a similar flavor profile. Or, he mentions, potentially a domestic Comté.
Right.
And he plans to grab a physical sample for Sarah to taste before they commit any of their precious budget to it.
And this is proactive contingency planning in action. He anticipated the cascading effects of a port delay and sourced domestic alternatives before the crisis even fully materialized.
Let me ask you a strategic question on behalf of the listener, though.
Sure.
If you, as a client, dictate a specific imported Swiss Gruyere for a prestige event, a sharp cheddar, no matter how similar the flavor profile is objectively not what you asked for.
No, it's not.
So how does you sell a client on a sharp cheddar when they explicitly demanded a Swiss Gruyere? Does a similar profile actually cut it in high-end events?
This raises an important question, and it gets to the core of what professional service providers are actually selling.
Okay, I'm listening.
Professional sourcing at this level is about fulfilling the experience rather than just supplying the exact physical item. We have to look at the underlying psychology of the client's request. Like, why did they specify imported Swiss Gruyere in the first place?
Well, I mean, it carries a certain cultural cachet, right? It sounds exclusive on a menu.
Exactly. They are buying prestige. They're buying a specific narrative to present to their guests. When the global shipping infrastructure fails and that Gruyere becomes unavailable, James knows he isn't just substituting dairy.
He has to substitute the prestige.
Yes. Notice that he doesn't just suggest grabbing any random backup cheese from a supermarket shelf.
Right.
He specifically targets a boutique creamery that produces an award-winning domestic cheddar.
So he is basically replacing one form of exclusivity with another.
Precisely. Because if James reports back to the client and just says, the port was delayed, so we bought a generic cheddar, the client registers a massive loss of value. The whole event feels diminished to them.
It feels cheap.
Right. But if he frames the contingency plan differently, if he says something like, due to a bottleneck in global shipping, we took the initiative to pivot to a highly exclusive, award-winning domestic cheddar from a boutique microcreamery.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The client still feels like they're receiving a premium, curated experience.
That's brilliant.
The physical item changed completely, but the perception of high value is maintained. Contingency planning is really as much about narrative framing as it is about finding a physical substitute.
Which means the tasting sample James suggests grabbing isn't just to check if the cheese tastes good.
No, not at all.
It's to verify that the new item can actually uphold the weight of that new narrative.
Exactly. It has to taste like an award winner.
Right. Okay, so they navigate the sudden budget shortfall, they protect the fragile cold chain of the seafood, and they successfully pivot around a massive global shipping failure.
A very busy hour and a half.
Seriously. But all of this physical hustling like inspecting fish gills and tasting cheese is totally useless if the client thinks they just winged it.
Oh, yeah. You have to prove the work.
Which moves us from the physical chaos of the market into the invisible architecture of the job, the digital paper trail.
Ah, the administrative layer. You know, it is often treated as an afterthought in fast-paced environments, but it is arguably the most critical component for a long-term viability.
Totally. Because as they are practically jogging through the stalls, Sarah gives James a very strict directive. Every single invoice has to be itemized separately.
Right down to the penny.
Yeah. The client demands to see the exact cost breakdown between the organic goods and the conventional goods. And James has been tracking everything in real time on this synced tablet.
Multitasking at its finest.
Yeah. His final deliverable isn't just ensuring the truck is loaded, it's generating a clean, comprehensive PDF summary for Sarah to review before they even leave the market premises. So what does this all mean? It feels like James is essentially acting as a real-time human algorithm, instantly translating physical tomatoes and fish into data points for the accounting department.
I think that's a great observation. And that directive from Sarah, it really highlights the strategic element of the strategic sourcing mission.
Because anyone can just go buy food.
Exactly. Anyone can buy food. But the meticulous itemization of organic versus conventional costs, that serves a much deeper corporate purpose.
Like what?
Well, high-end clients often have internal stakeholders, they have strict departmental budgets, or even corporate sustainability commitments they need to legally prove.
Oh, so the data is just as valuable as the produce itself.
In many ways, yes. In complex operations, documenting the execution is just as critical as the execution itself.
It's like he's providing an immutable proof of work, translating bruised tomatoes and delayed cheese into clean, verifiable data.
Yeah, a ledger is a great way to conceptualize it. If you don't document the pivot, the client might assume the operation was just haphazard. Transparency is the actual mechanism that builds trust.
Right.
And we look back at the very beginning of the source. Trust is what allowed James to negotiate that 5% discount with Mr. Henderson in the first place.
Oh, wow. Full circle.
Yeah. The agency's reputation for high volume and reliability is built entirely on keeping clients happy, and keeping clients happy requires proving, with hard data, that their money was spent efficiently and exactly to specification.
It really forms a closed loop. The invisible digital architecture of the PDF secures the client's trust, which then secures the funding for the next event, which gives James the leverage to promise Mr. Henderson future business.
It is all completely interconnected.
It's incredible. Looking back at this 90-minute sprint, the density of the problem solving is just remarkable.
It really is a masterclass.
They manage a 15% scope creep without breaking the budget by leveraging future reliability. They defended the physical value of MSC-certified salmon through rigorous cold chain management and dockside QA checks.
They mitigated a global supply chain failure by substituting not just a product, but a prestige narrative.
Yes. And then they documented the entire chaotic process into a real-time, transparent ledger.
Which demonstrates that successful procurement isn't about avoiding friction.
Right.
It's about building systems resilient enough to absorb that friction.
That is such a huge takeaway for you listening to this right now. Whether you are planning a massive corporate meeting, managing a complex software rollout, or honestly just doing the weekly grocery run, applying this level of foresight, having a Plan B creamery in your back pocket, changes the game entirely.
It really does. It's the difference between merely surviving a crisis and actually controlling it.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up this analysis, I'd suggest considering the broader implications of these invisible systems.
I love that.
The next time you attend a flawlessly executed event, or even just purchase a perfectly ripe, vine-ripened tomato at the store, try to look past the final presentation. Ask yourself, what chaotic delays, frantic micro-negotiations, and invisible cold chains had to be perfectly orchestrated just so you could experience that one flawless moment?
The complex architecture hiding behind the edible flowers, it certainly reframes how you look at the supply chain. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.